Mitch, num sistema educacional ideal, com que idade as crianças começariam a aprender a programar? Você já falou do Scratch Junior, mas qual a idade que você acha que é o ideal?
As soon as they're ready. It's the same thing I would say about learning to write. I wouldn't rush children to learn to write, but I'd give them every opportunity to start expressing themselves. So I would have this among the various activities that children are doing, that they should have wooden blocks for building towers, they should have finger paints for painting, and they should also have Scratch Junior or other things like it in order to start telling their own interactive stories. So it should be part of the collection of materials they have, and children can start using it as they're ready to use it. I don't think there's any ideal age. I wouldn't withhold it. I think some children will be ready earlier than other children, but I think all children should have a range of materials, a range of media to be able to express themselves.
A programação seria, na escola, uma disciplina ou uma competência transdisciplinar? E aqui entendendo que seria algo dentro do currículo mesmo, que habilidades os professores precisam ter para ensinar a programação? Qual seria a formação de professores ideal para usar esse tipo de ferramenta?
If I were starting a school, I would make it both a separate class and a transdisciplinary activity. I think there needs to be some special focus to help you get started, but then you would make use of it throughout all of the different disciplines. Again, somewhat similar to writing, that you do have a class where you learn to write, but then you use writing throughout all of the different disciplines. I think as far as what type of special background the teachers would need to have, I think the teachers need a little bit of background just to get started working with programming, but I don't think they need so much background. And I think they can continue to learn with the children. Now, that might seem scary to some teachers, but I think this is part of the new mindset we need in order to bring new creative activities to the classroom. The teachers should be learning along with the children and have older children helping younger children, and there's a whole community that can work together with one another. We see this in the computer clubhouses where we work. We have many volunteer mentors who come and work with the young people at the clubhouses. Many of the mentors have a much stronger background in art and music than in technology or programming, but they serve a very valuable role that they help the children learn to be expressive, and they help the children learn how to persevere even if they get frustrated, like all creative people need to learn to do. And if questions come up that they're not sure how to solve, they ask other people and they work on it together. I think over time, there will be more expertise in the society because I think we're at a difficult transition because as today's children grow up, and many children today are starting to use Scratch and Scratch Junior, when they become teachers 15 years from now, 20 years from now, they will be in a better position to help support it in the schools. In this transition time, I still think we can introduce it, and teachers can learn the basics in a workshop and then continue to expand their knowledge as they work with their students.
Que habilidades necessárias ao programar ajudam as pessoas a estarem mais prontas para as demandas do século 21?
When we talk about what children learn in programming, we sometimes divide it down into three big categories. The first category is concepts that they learn. So they learn concepts like variables, as you saw in the story with Andrew. They learn concepts like, conditional expressions, which are important in computers and math. So they learn some specific mathematical and scientific and engineering concepts. And that's what most programming courses focus on, but that's not what I think is most important. That's not what most connects it to 21st century skills. For me, the second category after concepts is what we call practices, or you might call it strategies. And this is, I think, what's, in my mind, very important. That as children program, they learn important design practices and problem-solving practices that I would see as 21st century skills. For example, they learn how to experiment and iterate, to try things out, and to make adjustments and revisions over time. And that's important not just in programming, but for all types of projects and problem solving. So experimenting and iterating is one practice. A second one is testing and debugging. And again, testing and debugging is very important in coding, but it's also important in all design projects and problem solving. A third thing they learn is reusing and remixing, how to build on the work of others. Again, that's useful in coding, but also useful in all design activities, how to build on the work of others. You shouldn't have to just think that you're doing this by yourself, but you can build on the work of others. A fourth practice is what we call decomposition, how to break complex problems down into simple parts. Again, very important in programming, but also important in all problem solving, to break down a complex problem into simple parts. So for me, these are some of the important 21st century skills that children learn through programming: experimenting and iterating, testing and debugging, reusing and remixing, decomposing and abstracting to make abstract ideas from simple cases. I would add to that the ability to persevere and persist in the face of frustration. That through programming, as with all projects, you learn how to be able to continue to work through even when things go wrong. So these are all some of the skills that you learn, some of the practices and strategies. Let me also mention a third category that I think is important in learning to program, but also useful in other things. We call this perspectives. And that's more about how people learn to see themselves in a new way and to see the world in a new way. That when children start to create programs from scratch, they start to see themselves as a designer. Now that's different than learning the skills to design things. It's about their own identity. And in my mind, it's very important for children to grow up seeing themselves as capable of creating and designing things. Too often when people interact with computers, they see it as something that someone else designs it and they use it. I want children to grow up with an identity as a designer, that they see themselves as designers. I also want children to have a critical way of looking at the world. When they see things in the world, they should think, how does that work? And when you start programming, it gives you a critical eye to start questioning, how do things in the world work? There was one 12-year-old boy, after making a Scratch project, he wrote a message to us and he said, now that I've worked in Scratch, I have a programmer's mind. I start wondering how everything in the world works. How does the car work? How does the toaster work? And in my mind, so for me, that was a great success. If he was starting to question how things in the world work, I think that's an important thing to learn. So I think those are some of the ways that I think learning to code goes beyond learning the concepts, which is what many people focus on. So too often, there's a lot of excitement now about learning to code, but too often, the focus is on learning concepts so you can get a job or a career. For us, it goes beyond learning concepts. It's about learning problem-solving strategies, seeing yourself in new ways, seeing the world in new ways, so that you can be an active participant in the society.
As escolas que você conhece que usam Scratch são, em geral, escolas que já inovaram com modelos mais parecidos com blended learning ou são escolas regulares, normais?
Right now, many of the schools using Scratch are what might be called early adopters. There's some of the schools and the teachers who are ready to try new things, who are somewhat more adventurous. Oftentimes, it's individual teachers, not whole schools, that a teacher who has found out about it and wants to find a way to bring it into her classroom or his classroom and is willing to take a risk to do it because it's not in the curriculum, but they think it's important for their students. So in many cases, it's an individual teacher who's willing to experiment and try new things, or a school who has a principal who wants to try new things and brings it into the school. But now I think we're at a transition point. We're starting to move beyond the early adopters. And in order to get it more into the mainstream, I think we have to get to a next level, to have greater support for helping a wider range of teachers learn how to integrate it into their classroom. For the teachers who aren't quite ready to take the risk and need somewhat more support. Also, we need to work with policymakers to add it to the curriculum so that it's not teachers who are defying the system to use it, but teachers who are fitting into the system by using it. As was mentioned earlier today, there are more countries and cities and states who are starting to bring coding into their curriculum, like England this fall, where it will become mandated in K through 12. So we'll start to see more people using it because it fits into the curriculum. So I think we're at a transition point now where it's starting to change from the adventurous teachers and the entrepreneurial teachers to moving more into the mainstream. But in order to make that transition, we're going to have to do a better job than before of providing support with teacher professional development and support materials so that teachers feel more comfortable knowing how to use it. I worry that in the beginning in England, when they try it, there'll probably be some backlash because there won't be enough support for it and it won't work well in some places. But that always happens in the beginning when you're trying new things. I think we all need to work together. And it's one thing, it'd be great if we can work together here in Brazil as coding moves into schools. I already met many teachers here today who are already using Scratch, but I think a lot of them are those adventurous teachers. I think as we move forward, working with some of the foundations today, we can try to provide better support for more workshops and materials to make it easier for all teachers to be able to introduce these ideas into their classrooms.
Já que você mencionou política pública, tem uma pergunta muito boa. Se você fosse escolhido ministro da Educação, qual seria a sua primeira medida?
The first things I would do would have nothing to do with coding, because they're much bigger issues to think about. Let me start by saying what my goals would be. So this isn't the first things, but I'll start with the broader goals. When I think about the way I would like to see schools in the future, I think about breaking down barriers. I think there are too many barriers in schools. I talked about the barriers between disciplines, that too often children go to science class and math class and social studies class. I'd want to break down those barriers so that children can work on projects that cut across the disciplines, cut across the subjects. So I want to have a more project-based approach that cuts across the disciplines. I would also break down the barriers between the class periods. In too many schools, there's 1 hour for this, then 1 hour for that, then 1 hour for this. The types of projects we want to work on are very difficult to do in 1 hour. Even though there is the activity called Hour of Code, you cannot generally really work on a project in an hour. You can just get a taste. So if we restrict to an hour, we'll just answer exercises. We won't work on projects. So I changed the timing in the schools to allow larger periods of time for working together. I'd want to break down the barriers between inside of school and outside of school, because I'd want children to be able to start work on projects that they can use in their everyday life and to be able to be inspired by issues in their community and to work on those issues inside the school. I would want schools to be open all day long so that even after students are finished with the school day, they can stay there and work on projects and be involved in activities. Now, I know that there are many challenges in doing this. I've been to some schools in Brazil before where there's several different sessions during the day, so I know that students couldn't just stay all day and work on different projects. So there's economic and practical and administrative issues that would make it difficult to bring about these changes. But that would be my goal. I would start to think about how can we break down those boundaries, the boundaries between disciplines, the boundaries between class periods, the boundaries between inside of school and outside of school. Also, break down the boundaries and barriers between ages. I would encourage more students of different ages to work together. Referring to the question before about how can teachers be prepared, well, we should have older students helping younger students, and both would benefit. The older students would benefit by helping younger students to learn, and the younger students would benefit by having more people teaching them things. So I try to have students learning. We've seen this at our computer clubhouses after school, how students between 10 and 18, they all benefit from each other when they're mixed together and learn from each other. Now, of course, there are also challenges, but I think the benefits outweigh the challenges. So I'd also break down those barriers. Now, these are not easy things to implement, but those are things that I would do. I would try to break down those boundaries and set as the goal for people to be truly fluent, not just with technology, but fluent with writing and reading and mathematics. So not just learn a bunch of disconnected facts, but to be fluent so they can express themselves through projects.
Diversos países.
Does anyone want to start that school with me? So maybe we can work together.
Diversos países vêm discutindo direitos digitais. Entre as preocupações colocadas estão privacidade, neutralidade na rede, acesso ao conhecimento. Como essa iniciativa se insere nessas discussões? No Scratch.
Many of these concerns come up in a natural way in the Scratch online community. That as children share their projects in the Scratch online community, they have to think about things about issues like privacy and copyright and ownership. In the Scratch community, children, all of the projects are covered by what's called Creative Commons license, which means that other people are allowed to build on top of it, to use your work. If you share a project, other people can use your work and build on top of it. And many newcomers to the Scratch community at first are very disturbed by this. They see somebody building on their work and they write an angry message and they say, "This person is copying my work." And that leads to a good discussion. We say, in the Scratch community, you're allowed to build on other people's work. Now, you should give credit and acknowledgement. To be part of the community, it means that it's your responsibility to give credit and acknowledgement when you use someone else's work, but you're allowed to use other people's work, and we think we'll all benefit as part of the community if we do things that way. So these issues come up. There are other issues about controversial topics, about what is appropriate to be discussed in the Scratch community. And sometimes teenagers will feel that they should be able to discuss certain topics, and we'll say, but they're 10-year-olds in the community, and this isn't appropriate for 10-year-olds. So we'll have discussions in the community about what's appropriate online and what's not appropriate online when you have people of all ages and all backgrounds and all cultures sharing a community. So these are all topics that come up as part of the Scratch community. One thing I often forget to mention is that Scratch is free. It always has been free, and we plan to always keep it free. But that also leads to questions about how is it that you can make things sustainable in the online world. And it leads to questions when young people make their Scratch projects and they ask us about selling their Scratch projects or putting up ads for their Scratch projects, and how do we deal with that? So all of those issues come up as part of our discussion within the Scratch community.
Imaginando que a sociedade tem, em sua maioria, aprendido a programar, ou ao menos entender o conceito, e assim passarem a ser mais colaborativos, as pessoas mais preparadas para enfrentar situações inusitadas, o que aconteceria depois? Qual seria a próxima evolução?
For the next step, I think we need to provide better support to move to the next stage. As I explained before, to go from the early adopter, adventurous educators, to a much broader range of people using Scratch and learning coding. And this means being able to have better support materials, better workshops to support, but also a change in the mindset of how people think about technology. Because if we see coding as just a skill to be learned, then it will not get out into the society in the right way. If we bring Scratch or other coding into schools and we just introduce it and then give a test about describe what a variable is, describe what a conditional is, and it's then taught to the test, we will not achieve what we want. So I think what we need to do is to provide better support materials, better workshops, not just for learning the technical skills of programming, but for learning an attitude and an approach for introducing programming and coding, to introduce it in the context of supporting fluency, and to help young people, to help educators and young people learn that the value of coding is not just for learning the concepts, but for learning the practices and the strategies and the approaches for expressing themselves in the society. Now, that's not easy. I'm not claiming that it's easy, but I think the right steps is to build a community. And to build a community means bringing people together. So in the United States, one approach we're taking is, in Boston, we have a meetup every month at MIT for educators in the Boston area who want to share ideas about Scratch. So this is just, they come together and share ideas with each other. Because it does not scale very well if our group at MIT or a university in Brazil has to do all of the workshops. Of course, we do some workshops, and it'd be great if some of the foundations here do some workshops, but we also have to self-organize. So for educators to set up their own meetups, to come together, to share ideas with one another. We have online sites like Scratch Ed, where you can share online, but we also need to meet up, to come together, to be able to share ideas. I think that way it needs to come bottom up. We can do some things by having new policies to change the curriculum, and some of that can be top down. But in my mind, what's more important is to have a bottom-up grassroots movement of how educators who believe in this influence other educators. I found it really sad that, like this morning, when Allison, the educator from California, who was having wonderful examples in her classroom, but when I asked her, did anyone else in the school do this? She said no, she was the only teacher. And that can't happen. Once when we have a teacher who has success and enjoys and sees the value of this, they have to spread the word to other teachers. And I do see lots of examples of this happening. In the United States, there's a whole movement called ed camps, where teachers come together for meetups and share ideas with one another. We see more online courses, not just run by universities delivering expert advice from professors, but online courses that are peer-to-peer, where educators share ideas with one another. So I think we need more things like that, where we help lay the foundation for educators and parents, for that matter, to share ideas and learn from one another.